I'm going to show you how to use the SmartGrid function. So over here, you'll notice this SmartGrid button. If you click on that, you'll notice 12 columns appear. And so what you can do with this is, if I move this out of the way on purpose, I can align this to the grid. So I can align it to the first column, I can align it to the second column, third column, and so on. So in this case, I will just align back to the first column. And what the SmartGrid system lets you do is it lets you align and resize shapes using this 12 column system. So for example, I have this text box which is 4 columns wide. If I want to, I can maintain the aspect ratio by clicking this button, or I can resize this based on a 3 column wide, a 5 column wide, and so on. So in this case, to fit these the 12 column layout, I will resize it to a 4 column. And then the other thing this lets me do is it lets me align things horizontally as well as vertically. So you'll notice this line here at the top, this is a guideline. And so if I go to another slide here, which is a similar slide, I'll select this text box here. And what it'll do is when I click on this triangle SmartGrid, I'll set the guideline. What that'll do is it'll set this horizontal guideline to the top of this object that I've selected. And so now you can see this horizontal guideline is perfectly aligned with the top of this object that I've selected. So what that lets me do is I can go back to all my other slides, like this one. And this one is already aligned vertically. I've already aligned it to the first column, but now I also want to align it horizontally. So I want it to align it to the top. So I'll select top. And now what you'll notice is that I've got these 2 slides and they're perfectly aligned. I can also turn the SmartGrid off, and there are other functions here as well. So one of them, I'll show you right now. It works with any object, but in this case, I'll use the title object. So if I click on this slide, this is where it should be. So what I can do is I can select this object and do an align copy. So what that'll do is it'll copy the exact XY coordinates of that object. And when I go to a different slide, I can select this object here and then do an align paste. And so what that does is it applies those XY coordinates to that object. So when I flip back and forth, everything on my slide is perfectly aligned. The next thing I want to show you is this concept of matching different sizes. So for example, if I grab this box and I change the size, what I can do is I can grab this box first, that's my target, and then grab the second box, and then over here I can match the size. I can make them the same width, I can make them the same height, or in this case I could just make them the same size. And finally, the last thing I want to show you is how you can use the SmartGrid function to change the spacing between different objects. So for example, over here under spacing, I can change the spacing. I can decrease the spacing between these objects, or I can increase, or I can completely remove the spacing using this feature. What's nice about this feature is as I use it, it always guarantees that the space between all these objects is always the same. So the space between the blue and the red is always the same between the red and the green. And that's SmartGrid.